Hi everybody, today we're going to learn how to use trigonometric identities to simplify trig expressions. You are probably going to find this a lot easier than the previous lesson, or at least I hope you do, although the previous lesson wasn't that difficult. Okay, so let's take a look at the do now. It says write the following functions in terms of sine, cosine, or both. I rewrote these on the next slide just so that I have room to write it out and show you how to do this. All right, so let's take a look at tangent of theta. Okay, tangent of theta, remember tangent is simply sine over cosine. So we're just going to rewrite this as sine of theta over cosine of theta. Cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. Therefore, it is equal to cosine of theta over sine of theta. Cosecant, remember that is the reciprocal of sine, so we're going to rewrite that as 1 over sine of theta. And secant is the reciprocal of cosine, so it's written as 1 over cosine of theta. This is just this exercise is really to help you moving forward understand that you can express these functions in different ways, and that's going to help us with today's lesson. Okay, so here we have just a quick review of the reciprocals. All right, sine is 1 over cosecant. Cosecant is equal to 1 over sine. Cosine of x is 1 over the secant. Secant is 1 over cosine of x. Tangent is 1 over the cotangent. Cotangent is 1 over tangent, and then we have tangent, which is sine over cosine, and then cotangent is the reverse of the reciprocal of that, cosine over sine. Okay, here we have the Pythagorean identities along with some of their variations. Those are going to come in handy as well. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one. We want to write this as a single trigonometric function. So we have here cosecant of theta times sine squared theta. What we're going to do is start with cosecant. We're going to write cosecant as 1 over sine of theta. And sine, that gets multiplied by the sine squared of theta. Okay, and now notice we have 1 sine on the bottom, 2 on top. All we have to do is simplify 1. This here, we're left with sine theta. Multiply your numerators, and we have sine theta over 1, which is just simply sine of theta. Okay. All right, next one we have 1 minus cosine squared x times cosecant of x. Okay, so going back, if you look back really quickly at the identities, scroll back up here at the identities, 1 minus cosine squared of theta is the same as sine squared theta. So we can replace 1 minus cosine of squared of x with sine squared of x. And we're going to multiply that by cosecant of x, but remember that we can rewrite cosecant of x as 1 over sine of x. I'm going to make this over 1. And just like we did in the last problem, cross 1 sine of x out with the 1 on top, and we're left with sine of x. Okay, next one we have secant of theta times the cosine of theta minus cosine squared of theta. Write this expression as a monomial with a single trigonometric function. Okay, now notice here, okay, we've got some multiplication going on over here, and we have subtraction here at the tail end. Well, think of this. I want you to have in your mind, do the terms have anything in common? Okay, thinking along the lines of greatest common factor, GCF. They both have cosine in common. What we can do is factor out a cosine. Factor out cosine of theta. When you do that, you're left with secant theta minus cosine theta. Okay, so basically what we did was we went back and divided by the GCF, which is cosine of theta, to get what's left in the parentheses. Okay, and then we're going to rewrite secant as 1 over cosine of theta, okay, minus cosine theta over 1. And now here, what we want to do is get a common denominator. So cosine theta over, now cosine theta, in parentheses, cosine theta is going to be our denominator. Okay, so what that means is we're going to multiply the 1 over here by cosine of theta, and we got to do the same thing on top. Okay, that's going to become then 1 minus cosine squared of theta all over cosine theta. Okay, now here, just quickly, I'll show you 1 minus cosine of theta times cosine of theta is going to give us that 1 minus cosine squared of theta. Okay, and now make that a fraction. Notice what I have in the numerator and the denominator. I can simplify this cosine with this cosine, and then what I'm left with is simply 1 minus cosine squared of theta, and remember what that's equal to. That's equal to the sine squared of theta. Okay, next example here, we want to write this again as a signal trig function. Secant of theta divided by cosecant of theta. Okay, we're going to write this out as 1 over cosine of theta divided by 1 over sine of theta. Now remember, we're not going to leave it as a division problem. We're going to convert this into multiplication. 1 over cosine theta times sine theta over 1. Multiply numerator and denominator. Multiply numerators, multiply denominators. We get sine of theta over cosine of theta, which is the same thing as the tangent of theta. Okay, number 5, we have here secant squared of theta. We're going to rewrite that as 1 over cosine squared of theta. Cotangent is going to be written as cosine squared of theta over sine squared of theta. Okay, times sine theta over 1. Okay, the cosine of theta's cosine squareds cancel out. I can cancel out this sine with one of these down here, which leaves me with a single sine of theta. And when we clean this up, our numerator is 1. Our denominator is the sine of theta. And remember, 1 over sine of theta is the same thing as cosecant of theta. So therefore, your answer is choice number 3. Okay, number 6. Tangent of theta times cosecant. We're going to rewrite this as sine over cosine. Cosecant is going to be written as 1 over sine. Can cancel out the sines. I'm left with 1 over cosine of theta, which is the same as secant of theta. All right, number 7. Show that secant of theta times sine of theta times cotangent of theta is equal to 1. And show that it is an identity. Okay, so if you take secant and write it as 1 over cosine of theta times sine over theta, sine of theta over 1 times cosine theta over sine theta. Okay, so watch when we cancel this all out. It's going to equal 1. And there you have it. Okay. And last but not least, write as a single trigonometric function. We have sine squared of theta over 1 times cosine of theta over 1 times sine of theta over cosine of theta times cosecant, which is 1 over sine of theta. Okay, we just go through and simplify everything here that we can. Cosine and cosine, sine and sine. And we're left with sine squared theta on top, 1 on the bottom. And that is your final answer. And which is the exit ticket and our last slide. If you have any questions, guys, you know how to reach me. Okay, I hope you found this helpful and have a great day. See you soon.